Now we will discuss leaderless replication. So what is leaderless replication? In leaderless replication, all are the replicas. No, there is no concept of leader and followers here. All are behaving like a same. So if client wanted to read or client wanted to write, that client need to write on all the databases. Here client need to write for one request, client need to write on all the databases. Same for the read. If client wanted to read, client need to read on from the all the databases. Now the problem in the leaderless replication. So the problem is the inconsistent. So let's suppose for writing the request, client is making the write request to all the replica. Now client could not write on R4 and R5 due to some network issue. Now we have a two-way. Either we can make full request fail, or we can say, or we can configure the value of W is equal to 3. The W means number of replica required for successful write. If 3 out of 5 successfully acknowledged to the client, then we can successfully responded back to the client. So in that way, R1, R2, R3 having the updated value, but R4, R5 is outdated now. Now for the read request, same client wanted to read the value. Now the same client initiating the request to all the replica, but that client not able to read from R1, R2 and R3. And client got result only from R4 and R5. Now again we have a two-way. One, we can make or we can mark the full request failed, or we can set the value of R is equal to 2. R means number of replica required for successful read. Means if 2 out of 5 successfully acknowledged back to the client, we can mark our request successful. But the problem here is R4 and R5 are outdated. R4 and R5 don't have the updated values. So that means we are returning the client the outdated values here. Now what is the solution? So how to select the right value for the W and R? So the answer is the quorum. Quorum means minimum number of replica required for successful request or to make the request successful. So quorum formula is the W plus R should greater than N, and where N is the number of replica, W is the number of replica required for successful write, R is the number of replica required for successful read. Now let's understand quorum with this help of this example. So same example where client is making a write request. Now here how we are calculating the W. W is equal to N by 2 plus 1. That means the 3. And same for the R is equal to N by 2 plus 1 is equal to 3. So means if 3 out of 5 successfully acknowledged, then we can mark that request successful. So here let's suppose this client is making a write request to these 5 replica, and we could get success only from R1, R2 and R3. The write request on R4 and R5 got failed here. Now the same client after some time fetching the same value, and but we could only get value from R3 and R4 and R5, and fetching from R1 and R2 failed due to some network issue. Now in the quorum, we can say R3 is the common one where first write successful on the R3 and then read successful on R3. Now the R3 is a common one that have a up-to-date value. So basically while serving, we can do whoever the latest version of that record, then we can serve that record to the client. So in that way, we can resolve this inconsistency issue with this quorum. Now the what are the advantages? Advantages are the handling n by 2 failures. So as we can see while writing, if 2 nodes are not responding and 3 are responding, still we are marking the request successful. That means if n by 2 nodes are failed and n by 2 plus 1 nodes are working, then still we can serve to the client. The disadvantage is the temporary inconsistency. When the write is happening, when the write is basically happening to R1, R2 and R3, if client then making a read request and to R1, R2 and R3 or R4 and R5, might be sometime client gets the outdated value or client because the write is still in progress. So that is the only disadvantage of this quorum. Now the what is the second configuration of quorum? The second configuration is the all writes and one read, meaning So we are setting the value of w is equal to 5. That means we need to write on all the databases. If any write or any write request failed on one database, we have to mark our full request failed here. So the advantage of this system is the we need to read only from any database or any one database, and where r is equal to 1, that means we need to read only from one database, because all the databases are having up to date value. We can read from any database. This configuration we can use for high read queries or high read transaction system. So the advantage of this system is the fast read, because we need to read only from one database. The disadvantage are two. One is the slow write, because we are writing on all the databases, so that is adding more latency. Second is the no resiliency in write. So if any node or for any node we could not write, then we have to mark the full request field here. Now the next one is the one write and all read. This is exactly opposite to the what we discussed previously. So in this case we are writing to only one node. So that's why we configure w is equal to 1. That means we can write to any database and we can mark that full request successful. Now for the read we have to do extra job here. Now here we configured r is equal to 5. So that means we need to read from all the databases. If any for any read request we are getting failure, we need to mark the full request failed here. So this configuration we can use for a high write transaction system where writes are mostly happening. So the advantage of this configuration is the fast write, because we need to write only on one system or one database. Disadvantage is the slow read, because we are reading from or we need to read from all the databases. No resiliency in read. So basically if we could not read from any database, we need to mark the full request failure here. The another concept of the quorum is the sloppy quorum. So what is the sloppy quorum? Sloppy quorum means so let's discuss with this example. So this is the client and the client configuration is the w is equal to 3. Client wanted to update the value of x equal to 10. So this is the preferred quorum. So preferred quorum means R1, R2, R3 are the up to date one, and we can use the preferred quorum for read and write. And there might be lag on R4 and R5. So that's why R1, R2, R3 are the preferred quorum. So here client initiated the request for the writing the value of x to R1, R2 and R3. But client not able to or could not able to write on R3. Then we have a two way. One, we can fail the write request, or what we can do, we can write to other available database, that is R4. R4 is not part of preferred quorum, but for temporarily we just write on the R4 database. Now after some time R4 transfer the value of x to R3, because we need to up to date to R3 data. So that's why R4 is transferring the value of x to R3. Now that concept is called as a hinted off, where we are returning the same temporary data of R3 to R3. Now what we discussed, the configuration of w and r, and this is the quorum formula. Quorum formula means w plus r should greater than by n. The balance configuration means like the system that where we can achieve read and write in the optimization way. That is basically for n is equal to 3, w should be 2, r should be 2. That means one of them will be the up to date data. Heavy read configuration, the system where we need to serve high reads or where we are getting high reads, that system should be fast read system. And for that, where n is equal to 3, w we can configure 3 and r we should configure 1. So in that way we can get data or we can read data from any node, but in this system our writes are very slow. Now heavy write configuration, system where then we want to build a system that is serving mostly for writing operation. For writing operation, so we need to set w is equal to 1 for the n is equal to 3, and we need to set r is equal to 3. That system will be, and on that system read will be very slow. We can also set without configuration, without quorum configuration also. So In that, without quorum configuration, so where n is equal to 3, we can set w is equal to 1, r is equal to 1. Now this system will work, but that system will return inconsistent data or outdated data because there is no common node or common database that is having up to date value.